Hello and welcome to Murder with Friends, the show where friends get together and talk about the darker sides of history. I'm your host, Grace Baldridge, and joining me today, oh boy, I love these, is a campfire edition featuring my friends Amir, Asher, and Alex. Welcome to this episode of Murder with Friends. You're all like waving. Okay, so wait. Let me give some context. So you guys know Amir. He and I created the show together. Asher and Alex work on Pop Trigger behind the scenes. So Alex, you are an editor, and Asher, you work in camera, you do sound, you do sort of a little bit of everything.
Oh, yeah.
And we have all talked about murders and true crime cases before, so I thought it'd be kind of cool to bring on people who work on this channel, who make this channel so great, to talk about some hometown horrors, which is the theme for this week's edition of Campfire episodes. I'm gonna kick it off because I'm very excited to tell you guys about one of the craziest cases and stories. It is about Marc Dutroux. You guys may know that I am from Waterloo, Belgium, and this was a major case in Belgium. That probably he is the most infamous killer from Belgium. And let's just get right into it. I'm gonna bring you guys into the story in August of 1996, and a 14-year-old girl has been kidnapped in broad daylight. A van comes up and like a guy comes out, grabs her, and she disappears. Now, this is one of many disappearances that had been going on in Belgium during this time. People were on high alert. Fortunately, because people were on high alert, someone spots the van and gives enough information on the license plate of the van that they are able to track the van down to Marc Dutroux, who is obviously the guy. And they bring him in for questioning along with his wife, Michelle Martin, and then also Michel Lelièvre. I don't know, should I do the French pronunciations or just
Go with French. Yeah.
Michel Lelièvres. Anyway, so they bring them in for questioning. They arrest them. They have enough probable cause here, and then they confess. But what they confess to opens up just the beginning of this story, okay? So there was the kidnapping, but like I said, there were other girls that had gone missing. So let's just jump right back to the beginning. It is February 1986. Dutroux and Michelle Martin were arrested for abducting and raping 5 girls. Remember, this was a married couple. So she colluded with her husband to abduct and rape 5 girls. He's released in 1992, and his wife serves 5 years for helping him with this. He also was known for doing like petty crime, car theft. He also lied to get prescription medication that he would then use to drug his victims. So 1986, he is already found guilty of being a fucking weirdo, crazy, terrible person. His mom also, after he's released early, writes a letter to the police saying, hey, I think my son is maybe abducting and kidnapping girls. I think you should keep an eye on him. That doesn't apparently go anywhere. And then in June 1995, so remember, he's released in 1992 for good behavior. The good behavior that, I don't know how that gets you out of raping 5 girls and abducting them, but whatever, that's what the criminal justice system was at that time. So it's June 1995, and 2 8-year-old girls are also kidnapped and imprisoned by Dutroux and also by his wife, Michelle Martin, and Michel Lelièvre. So I should give a little bit of context here. Sorry if I'm all over the place, but this is a case that I grew up hearing about, and so I have a lot to say about it. So Michel Lelièvre, his friend, his accomplice in this, was a druggie, and what's important that you know about that is that Dutroux would always supply him with drugs so that Michelle was more likely to help him with these plans, but none of them ever went to the police. And in fact, they knew about him making these cellars to imprison girls, and I have a clip right now that gives you an idea of what these cellars that I'm talking about looked like.
I've been into that cage. If you see a picture of it, if you're going to show pictures of that cage on television or in a newspaper, it can never describe what it's really like. It's like this. You can't, if you try to spread your arms, you can't get any further than this. You can't stand there. It comes only till here. This you wouldn't even put a dog in.
like a total monster of a person. So he keeps the 2 8-year-old girls in the cellar, but then in August, he goes out and he gets 2 more, Anne Marchal and then Effie Lambrex. And I'm from the French-speaking part, so if I'm butchering those names, that's because they're from the Dutch-speaking part. I don't mean to. But because he already had the 2 other girls in the cellar, he kept them in a different part of the house, also chained up. So then it becomes like a whole mess because in December 1995, he gets arrested and he is put behind bars, not for anything to do with his like sketchy connections to kidnapping and abducting girls and sexual abuse, none of that. He gets put behind bars for car theft. And during this time, he had instructed his wife, who knew that all this was going on and never went to the police. He was like, all right, I have 4 women who are being kept against their will. Make sure you feed them while I'm gone. The wife feeds his dogs and doesn't feed the girls. So the 2 girls die in the cellar. The 2 8-year-old girls die in the cellar. And then we don't exactly know what happened to Anne Marchal and Effie Lambrex. They were a little bit older. They were 17, I believe 19 years old. But what we do know is how they died. We don't exactly know how they got to where they died because he had a number of different properties because of all this fraud and just a shitty guy in general. Shitty people find ways to do shitty things. Anyway, so they were found that they had been drugged and buried in like a backyard. They were buried alive. Horrific, like absolutely horrific ways to die. This is where it's gonna get even crazier. And this is like the Belgian people were so incensed by how this was handled that it was like to the point, like to the brink of not, I wanna say revolution, but people were getting really heated because they felt like these people were disappearing and the police had no idea exactly what was going on. Everything was way too slow. So he's behind bars, his wife is feeding his dogs, people are dying in captivity. Investigators, who, by the way, everyone in Belgium were looking for these girls because there were girls that were missing and people wanted to know where they were. Investigators come to his home looking for information about the car theft, if there was some sort of a ring that was going on, stealing luxury items, whatnot. And they come to his home with a locksmith that helped them get in. Now the locksmith hears screaming. The screaming was of the 2 8-year-old girls who were alive at that time. And he says, I think I hear kids screaming. And the investigator's like, no, that's just kids playing outside. I'm the police officer, you're not. It's like, let's not even look any further. So they could have saved those 2 girls, but they just chose not to act. They also found a number of nondescript videotapes in Dutroux' residence while he was behind bars. I mean, you can't have given the police more of a leg up to get this guy, right? Yeah. So they find all these video players, and if they had played the videotapes, they would have seen him constructing the cellar that you guys just saw, detailing what his plan was, all this stuff. But they didn't play the videotapes, even though they found them and kept them as evidence. Why? What would be a reason why you could think not even playing the videotapes?
When was this?
This was in 1996.
Okay, I was gonna. It was later. They didn't have a VCR player.
But that's what it was, Amir. They didn't have. So they said they didn't play the videotapes that would have given them all. They would have shown all these girls that were being held captive. They would have shown him like constructing the cellar, all this stuff, walking through step by step of his plan. If they had played it on a video cassette player, but they said we didn't have a cassette player, so we didn't play the tapes.
They couldn't get one?
Right. So now I'm catching back up to where we began our story. Remember, we began in August of 1996. Now in May 1996, he kidnaps 12-year-old Sabine Dardenne, and she has become somewhat of a celebrity in Belgium because she was held captive for 80 days. This badass bitch survives, testifies against him, and I think it was the day or 2 after she was released in August when they found and they confessed, and he really did sort of confess to everything pretty quickly and lead them to the places of where the bodies were. She biked to school, which was exactly how she was abducted the first time. She was abducted when she was biking to school, and she wrote a book called I Chose to Live, and in this book she never refers to Dutroux by name. She calls him like this bastard, this asshole, like this guy. Like she doesn't want to be a victim at all, and she like really has distanced herself from like, yeah, I was 12 years old when this happened, but I'm not 12 years old anymore. And like, this guy is such a weak, pathetic guy. And she asked him point blank in court, she said, why didn't you just kill me? And then he had like, oh, I've grown so attached to you. And she had to stop herself from laughing because she was basically being like, you fucking suck, like you are the worst. So she's become a little bit of a reluctant celebrity, even though she said like, I don't sing, I don't dance, it's just because I survived. But it really is like the resilience of the human spirit that she was in there for 80 days. And then Letitia, who we began this story with, who was abducted, she was only in there for 6 days. She also testified against him. So that catches everyone up to where we are. So Dutroux, Martin, Lelièvre, they were arrested in 1996 and they all sort of confess, but there's some murky stuff going on where people think that there's more than just Dutroux acting alone. Now, part of this comes because there was a police informant early on when in 1995, when the two first girls had gone missing, that had said, hey, this guy totally asked me if I would help him abduct girls, so I think we should look into him. They had Dutroux's name 2 weeks after the first two girls went missing, and no one looked for anything. So that was really strange. And so the conversation becomes, was it police incompetence? Or was there collusion because there was something more going on? Because Dutroux said that he was acting as part of a larger pedophile ring, and that people involved in this pedophile ring were high up in the government. Like there were major players at work here. So people didn't exactly know what to believe. And he was sentenced in 2004. So remember, they caught him in 1996, but it took this long because they were investigating whether or not there was a major pedophile ring that Dutroux is a part of. A big part of the testimony that says that that is not true, that was just a false flag that he was putting out there to send investigators on a wild goose chase, is that Sabine, again, the badass bitch who testified against him and survived 80 days in captivity, said, I didn't see anyone else except for him. Like he was the only person that I ever had interactions with, aside from Michel Martin as well. So that wouldn't really align with a big pedophile ring, but there have been other people who recognize Dutroux from other times in their life and have said, oh, I do remember when I was a prostitute and I was underage, working in this sex ring and seeing this guy there. So it became really a lot of conspiracy theories came about. The judge was also removed from being on the case because he had gone to a benefit dinner supporting the parents of the girls who had died. And they were like, no, then that's a conflict of interest. You can't do that, you're taken off the case. As a result of that, 300,000 people marched on Brussels. So imagine, yeah.
Oh my God.
So people, because people thought that there was an insane mishandling of affairs. And I was too young to remember it when the girls were found in 1996, but I remember in 2004 when this was all going down, when people just couldn't believe how things were being handled and what was being reported and what was being made public. The judge said on the stand, the judge that was removed from the case testified saying, you have no idea the fear that I have that I've gotten too close to something, and that there are people, not the Belgian people, but there are people that want me dead for trying to expose the truth about this pedophile ring, even though there hasn't been, the Belgian government has said there's nothing to indicate that that is true. And actually the investigation was wrapped because of too many conflict of interests. And basically in 2004, he was sentenced to life. Michel Martin, his wife, who knew about everything, who I think is just as guilty as him, was sentenced to 30 years. She served just 13. She's now free.
Oh,
yeah,
great.
Yeah,
Lovely.
it sucks.
Okay.
And then his accomplice Michel Lelièvre was sentenced to 25 years in prison. So I believe now he'll probably be coming up on his freedom as well. And then something that happened as a result of this, a third of Belgians with the last name Dutroux changed their last name.
Oh my God.
Wow.
Because of this was how hated and vilified this guy was in just in the Belgian community. As a country, in the state, this was the most hated man. And I remember hearing about him growing up as the boogeyman. And there was a lot of rumor and folklore that gets picked up, especially when you're a kid, because I was 12, 13 when all this was sort of coming out. In trial, and I remember hearing stories that they had caught him, this is not true, but that they had caught him as he was trying to cover up the cellars that he had dug for people. It is an insane story. I think that there's no way to be certain exactly what the truth is, and I think the lead reporters that I would give credence to from Belgium who reported on this, who followed the whole thing, have said the only thing we can be certain of is that we'll never get the whole truth. Because it's strange how the Belgian government would halt the investigation. That's really, really weird. But there also hasn't been enough brought to light that would indicate that there is a mass pedophile ring with government officials. People were ready to revolt. They felt like that they were being lied to. People felt like things were being covered up, and you had this beloved judge who everyone thought was doing a fine job and was very well respected. And he was taken off the case for doing something that was actually quite common for other judiciary parties in Belgium at that time. So this is one of those stories that it's painful to dive into because I remember the fear and I remember seeing photos, and I also remember hearing about Sabine, but it's also sort of fascinating now that so much time has passed to look back on and learn that the time doesn't actually solve everything. I still have way more questions than I have answers. A big one is that they had surveillance on his house. And the surveillance that they had on his house would have caught him when he was taking in one of the girls if it had been operating between at nighttime, but the surveillance camera only operated between 8 a.m. and 6 p.m. Why?
Doesn't all the worst shit happen at night? What are they thinking?
Right. And so that's things like that where I'm like, what is going on here? Like they on paper, everything was handled fine, slow, and there was some incompetence, but I guess fine. You know, when the guys were going into his house looking for items, they weren't looking for missing girls, they were looking for car theft and that sort of ring of like petty crime. So I guess, it's fine that they didn't look for a seller, but if you hear screaming and you know that there are girls everywhere on the news that are missing, why wouldn't you go look for it? It just doesn't add up.
So there was 100% incompetence by the cops. And we know this covering so many stories that's usually one of the big factors for why these killers and rapists and whatever get away for so long. Like John Wayne Gacy, there was numerous chances to bust this guy. He was in prison and they let him out on good behavior, stuff like that. And same thing's happening over here. Second, I think the government stopped the whole investigation after he made those claims because there probably is some sort of pedophilia ring that everyone in the government knows about. And we know that today. There have been several stories in the past couple of years of high-end pedophilia rings. I don't think that he was necessarily connected to those rings. Maybe he knew about them, but he had no direct relationship with them. Because like people in the pedophilia community, not that I'm talking from experience, but more or less from all the stories that I've looked at and researched, they know of each other. It's a pretty tight-knit community. So he may have known that this thing exists, but he didn't have any direct relationship with them. So he brought it up anyway, and then the government, because they know it exists, maybe they stopped it because of that.
Yeah, because people, I mean, a common theme when you look at some of the investigators that have spoken out since said it felt like we got too close and then we got shut down. And that is what I think is so unsettling and why it still hits a nerve with people, because you hate to believe that. You hate to believe that there would be such a large power colluding against you, conspiring for you to know the full truth. You want to believe that if you work hard enough, if you dig deep enough, that you'll find the whole truth, you'll get the answers that could give you some closure. But in this story, it's not there. And it just raises way more questions than we have answers. But that was my hometown horror. We're gonna be covering a lot more hometown horrors that are gonna be available for members. So if you're interested in that, head over to tytnetwork.com/join. Don't forget to share your thoughts in the comment section below. And we'll see you next time on Murder with Friends.